Hello, thank you for viewing today's webinar about coverage and reimbursement related to the use of Infobiotics' MoMe Kardia platform. I'm John Schmidt, Program Manager of Healthcare Economics and Reimbursement here at Infobiotic. Proper billing and reimbursement is a critical component of the MoMe Kardia platform. We recognize certain aspects of billing with MoMe might be new to practices, and we strive to make ample resources available to ease that transition, including this webinar. Today we will review procedure codes and coding best practices for all of the MoMe modalities. And then in part 2, we will discuss coverage from public and private payers and discuss additional resources that we have available. For a link to part 2, please see the description of this video. First, I want to introduce the most critical resource we have, our dedicated Infobiotic reimbursement team. Please send any questions you may have about the webinar, or if you have questions or issues with claims, coding, coverage, prior authorizations, if you receive denials, have any issues with getting paid, or you simply want to ensure you're billing properly before you submit claims. Anything like this, the easiest and quickest way to reach us is our reimbursement inbox, reimbursement@infobiotic.com. This is monitored by our entire reimbursement team. First, we'll discuss proper billing and coding for the three modalities that MoMe Kardia supports: Holter monitoring, event monitoring, and mobile cardiac telemetry. Holter monitoring is the lowest acuity test and is considered by many payers as sort of a first-line test. It is a 24 to 48 hour monitor. There are 4 associated codes with Holter monitoring, a global code, as well as 3 procedure codes that separate out the components of the service. The global code 93224 encompasses all of the components of the other Holter codes 932255, 6, and 7. With MoMe Kardia, the practices are performing all components of the test. Therefore, depending on your workflow structure, we consider it appropriate to use the global code or all of the component procedure codes with MoMe. Don't use both the global code and any of the piecewise codes. Use either. The Holter procedure is defined as external ECG recording up to 48 hours by continuous rhythm and storage. The global code includes recording, which includes hookup. There's scanning, analysis, and report, and review and interpret by physician or otherwise qualified healthcare professional. As mentioned, there are 3 component codes: the hookup, the technical, which includes scanning, analysis, and reporting, and then the professional, which is physician review and interp. The global code also encompasses all reimbursement of the component codes. So there's no financial advantage to using the global code or billing piecemeal. We recommend use of the global code when possible, as it makes billing streamlined and claims simpler. The national Medicare average rate for Holter monitoring is $90 in 2019. This will obviously depend on your location, as Medicare rates differ geographically. Some additional requirements: the Holter is 24 to 48 hours, so anything longer than 48 hours does not qualify for additional reimbursement as a traditional Holter monitor. Documentation and notes must reflect medical necessity for the service. Those do not always have to be submitted to payers, but it is advisable to keep those in case there are medical necessity reviews or audits later on. Also list any ICD-10 codes indicating prescription of the test. Another way of documenting why the test was performed. Pretty standard from CMS guidelines, but we do want to make this clear. As mentioned before, the service can be reported globally with 93224 and use the physician review date as the date of service. So for example, if I start the Holter on Monday, the test ends on Wednesday, but the physician is unable to review until Friday, the correct date of service would be Friday when the test is actually reviewed, not Wednesday when the service was ended. If there is less than 12 hours of recording, CMS advises use of modifier 52 basically indicating reduced service. No 26 PC or TC modifiers are required with these codes. Some procedure codes, instead of having separate procedure codes, separate the technical and professional components using those modifiers. Holter has a global code in addition to the separate codes that essentially already separate out the PC and the TC. So those should not be used. And please reach out to reimbursement@infobionic.com for questions about this. The second modality we'll discuss is event monitoring. This is an up to 30-day monitor using either a patient-triggered or auto-triggered loop. So with MoMe, if the patient is wearing the device, if there's an algorithm-triggered event, or the patient uses the symptom button, it will flag the event and possibly send the alert according to the practice criteria. The coding for event is very similar to Holter. There's a global code 93268, which encompasses all components of the service, as well as the piecemeal codes. Again, we recommend use of the global code when it's appropriate for simplification. Event monitor is defined as external patient and, when performed, auto-activated ECG rhythm-derived event recording with symptom-related memory loop and remote download capability up to 30 days. 24-hour attended monitoring is required. And the global 93268 includes the hookup 93270, the technical 93271, transmission analysis, which is also part of attended monitoring, and the professional 93272, which is review and interp. The national average Medicare payment for 2019 is $205 for event monitor. And as mentioned before, that depends on your geography. And as with Holter, there is no financial difference between the global code and the sum of the piecemeal codes. So do not use the global and the piecemeal codes. Use one or the other. Additional requirements are largely similar to Holter as far as documentation, medical necessity documentation, ICD-10 reporting. Do not use the TCPC 26 modifiers and can be reported globally with procedure code 93268. With event monitoring, current CMS guidance recommends the use of the end of the monitoring period as the date of service when billing globally for Medicare. The monitoring period for event monitors up to 30 days. Those requirements may be different for various private payers, so we recommend confirming this with payers during prior authorizations or otherwise. The other critical data service consideration with event monitoring is for the same dates of service, only one of the event monitor or Holter will be covered, not both. That is generally true with all MoMe modalities, whereas it is advisable to not bill multiple monitoring modalities with the same dates of service. Otherwise, it's likely that errors will be triggered, you'll receive reduced reimbursement, only the lower codes will be paid, or potentially denials. Also, when we say the monitoring period is up to 30 days, testing does not need to be 30 days in length, but additional monitoring cannot be ordered on that patient during the entire 30-day window. For example, if a patient is on an event monitor for 14 days, you couldn't bill for additional monitoring services on that particular patient until the end of the 30-day window. This can sometimes also occur with in-office procedures like in EKG, echo, tilt, stress test. It can conflict if billed on the same date of service together. If you're in a situation where conflicting procedures need to be billed with the same date of service, you can consider use of modifier 59, which indicates the monitoring should be treated as a distinct medically necessary procedural service on the claim. This might come into play if, for instance, you're performing an echo in the office and you decide to send that patient home on an event monitor, but that particular payer might require the data service for the event monitor to be the hookup, which is the same date that you're performing the echo in office. You might consider using 59 to present those as distinct procedural services. Please reach out to reimbursement@infoplanet.com for any questions with that. The third modality of the MoMe device is mobile cardiac telemetry, or MCT, defined as MCT with ECG recording, concurrent computerized real-time data analysis, and greater than 24 hours of accessible and retrievable data with ECG triggered and patient-selected events transmitted to an attended surveillance center for up to 30 days. So this is a test also for up to 30 days, and again, 30 days are not necessarily required. The key is when the physician is confident and able to make a diagnosis. We see that happen in 24 hours, or sometimes it takes the full 30 days, or anywhere in between. So if the physician is able to make a diagnosis on day 5, they are free to end that test. Conversely, if the patient is expressing they are having symptoms and those symptoms correspond with normal strips on the MCT, the physician could interpret that as a non-cardiac event if they so choose, and if they're confident in doing so, is free to end that test and move forward. As you may see, there is a major difference between coding the MCT and the other modalities. There is no global code. So if you are billing globally for MCT, you will use both the 93228 and the 93229. The physician component 93228 focuses on review and interp of daily reports. Reimbursement for that is $26, $27 about for Medicare, depending on your geography in 2019. Then the technical component covers attended surveillance and analysis transmission of daily reports. Something important to note here, it also includes the hookup within the broader technical code. So do not use another hookup code from one of the other modalities. It is already encompassed in 93229. The MoMe platform allows the practice to perform and bill for this technical component, which has an average 2019 Medicare payment of $719, depending on your geography. A few key requirements with these codes. Similar to Event Monitor, someone has to be able to respond to alerts 24/7, whether by phone, email, text message. The MoMe Kardia platform allows customization of these alerts, including what the alert level criteria is for each individual patient or doctor, and by what means these alerts are communicated. The physician can decide, I only want a phone call for this, email for that, I only want a phone call for this during business hours, or I want a phone call for this 24/7. This can be customized down to the doctor or patient level, depending on their needs and what the physician is mostly concerned with. Daily reports and review are required, which can be generated and reviewed through the MoMe system. Additionally, the test requires 24 hours of accessible ECG data storage. The MoMe Kardia platform allows for over 30 days of storage, so that is met. And for 2019, the total average MCT payment for Medicare is $745, depending on the geography. The basic documentation requirements are largely similar to the other two modalities. One thing to be cognizant of is some pairs or indications would require a Holter or other monitoring to be performed before MCT is considered medically necessary and covered. In those instances, reports and notes from those previous services should be included as part of the documentation of medical necessity. Previous CMS guidance specifically prescribed the date of service for MCT as the hookup date. However, more recent CMS guidance indicates the date of service for MCT should be at the end of the monitoring period. That's for Medicare. And as with events, different payers might have different requirements here. So please check with payers when possible. And as with Event Monitor, the monitoring episode is up to 30 days. And one important thing to note is on that claim, the episode would be a unit of 1. So that means an MCT of 5 days or 20 days would not be reported as 5 or 20 units. Any MCT up to 30 days is reported as 1. Additionally, no other cardiac monitoring can be billed for in that 30-day window on that patient, as with event. So if the MCT lasts 14 days, for that patient, no other monitoring can be ordered in that 30-day window. Or billed, I should say. The same date of service conflicts we discussed with the event monitor also apply to MCT. Do not report additional monitoring services with dates of service that overlap with the MCT monitoring period. Some in-office procedures might conflict as well. If appropriate and necessary for potentially overlapping procedures to be reported, the 59 modifier can also be considered for this, and we do advise against unnecessary or excessive use of the 59 modifier. A few other important things to note that apply largely to all of the MoMe monitoring modalities. Just to reiterate that you should not report multiple monitoring modalities together with overlapping dates of service. This is also meant to highlight, once again, that you should not mix the codes. So do not do anything like using a Holter hookup code with an MCT. That will generally lead to errors, reduced payment, or denials. As we mentioned before, some other in-office services might conflict. MCT is not a group service, but sometimes groupers will erroneously pick it up. So if that happens, the 59 modifier can be used if appropriate to and necessary to avoid these errors. Additionally, many practices that are used to working with external diagnostic testing facilities, we call IDTFs, sometimes are used to using box 20 on the CMS 1500 claim form. That's used to indicate use of an outside lab for technical services related to cardiac monitoring. Do not use this box when reporting testing with the MoMe Kardia. With MoMe Kardia, you are performing all components of the service. So essentially, you serve as what was previously an outside lab. Infobiotic cannot and does not bill Medicare or payers. One error we sometimes see, since practices previously often are using different codes than they were before previously for Holter event MCT, perhaps they were only billing the professional or maybe the hookup. In general, they're not used to billing globally often, is they didn't create proper or what's generally referred to as usual or customary charges for the MoMe codes. Reimbursement is generally determined by the lesser of billed charges or the fee schedule. So if you do not charge for a service, you're not going to be reimbursed. So please, before submitting claims, please ensure that you have established appropriate charges in your claims or billing system for all MoMe codes. Next, we will look at some of the common ICD-10 codes that you can use to document medical necessity of these tests. First, it's important to note that all payers, public and private, have different sets of codes that they deem appropriate to indicate medical necessity for Holter events and MCT. It is important to check with the policies, payers, Medicare administrators, the MACs, as they're referred to ensure that you're properly billing tests for Here are some common indications. ICD-10 codes that are referred to often in national and local coverage determinations from CMS and the Medicare administrators known as MACs. You'll see in general that these are symptom codes. MoMe is a diagnostic tool, so in general, your reporting has to include why you are performing the test, not necessarily the outcome or the end diagnosis of the test. Just to reiterate, this is not a master list, just a list of codes that are often seen. Please confirm covered indications with applicable policies and with public and private payers. Covered codes can often be found in the medical policies of private payers, and for Medicare in the local coverage determinations, LCDs, by the MACs. And please reach out to reimbursement for questions about and guidance for applicable codes. This concludes part 1 of the billing and coding webinar. If you look in the description, you'll find a link to part 2 where we will discuss coverage scenarios and available resources. Thank you.